Hello, everybody. This is Nannette Kennedy with Humanity's Team and the Evolution Revolution. And we are reading The Only Thing That Matters by Neale Walsch. And today is September 26th. Where did September go? And I'm going to hand it over to Lynda, our infamous reader.
Thank you. Hi,
You're
everyone.
welcome.
Okay, so we're reading The Only Thing That Matters, which is Conversations with Humanity, Book 2 by Neale Walsch. We're on chapter 29, which should start on page 141. That puts us about 62% through this reading. Can emotions be selected? If gratitude is a powerful tool that can change your experience of life by allowing you to focus on the only thing that matters, the question then becomes, what could cause you to decide to feel gratitude in the face of events or conditions that ordinarily would invite condemnation, not commendation? How do you put the power to use? As we explore this answer, you're invited to notice the specific words that were used in the question. What could cause you to decide to feel gratitude? Decide, emotions are things we decide to feel. Yes. Emotions are not what your experiences generate. They are what generate your experiences. Most people don't understand this, nor do most people see themselves as having an active role in choosing their emotions, not at first in any event. They may feel they can control their emotions by choosing something other than the emotion that arose initially, but most people do not feel that they are creating their first response. At first, they say, their emotions simply arise. They show up, unannounced, unbidden, unexpectedly sometimes. People think of themselves as just having an emotional response. They often say that they were just overcome by emotion. The truth is that all emotions are chosen. The mind decides.
Lynda, I'm sorry, you're cutting out a little bit. I wonder if you maybe should
Yes.
turn off your video.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you need me to back up?
A paragraph.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Okay. Decide. Emotions are things we decide to feel. Yes. Emotions are not what your experiences generate. They are what generate your experiences. Most people don't understand this, nor do most people see themselves as having an active role in choosing their emotions, not at first in any event. They may feel that they can control their emotions by choosing something other than the emotion that arose initially, but most people do not feel that they are creating their first response. At first, they say, their emotions simply arise. They show up, unannounced, unbidden, unexpectedly sometimes. People think of themselves as just having an emotional response. They say they were overcome by emotion. The truth is that all emotions are chosen, even the first ones. The mind decides to feel a certain way. Emotions are an act of will. This is challenging truth to embrace. Accept this, and suddenly you're responsible for everything, for how you feel, for how you act with others as a result of how you feel, and for how all events in your life are experienced. So when people hear this, they often look for an out. There must be some way in which I am not responsible for how I'm feeling. I mean, I can see that I'm responsible for what I do with my feelings, but my feelings themselves, come on, I can't be responsible for that. I feel the way I feel, and that's my truth. Am I supposed to lie about that? Am I supposed to be inauthentic? Have you ever told yourself or sold yourself some version of that? Most people have. Yet the human race can never evolve until we see the role we play in the creation of our emotions. The story we've been telling ourselves about emotions is our admission that we have no idea how the mind really works. The extraordinary description of the mechanics of the mind found in When Everything Changes, Change Everything is reprinted here virtually verbatim, as it offers deep insight that cannot be repeated too often. This book tells us that emotions are chosen. They are selected exactly the way you select the clothes you want to wear. Emotions are the costumes of the mind. The mind decides to feel a certain way. Now, this much will be conceded. Your mind makes its decisions so fast that it can seem as though you have no control over your emotions at all, at least not your very first reactions. Your mind moves you very quickly into an emotion based on a thought that it has formed. This is what is meant when people say, I feel very moved. Indeed, they were. Thought is energy, and your mind's job is to move that energy into motion. E plus motion. Since this happens so lightning fast, it becomes crucial that we know ahead of time, before we're confronted with an emotional situation, what makes us choose one emotion over another. You've already learned that it is your thought. Yet what generates the thought that creates an emotion? Where does any particular thought come from? If you can figure that out, you will have gone a long way towards being able to change your thought about something. And if you change your thought about something, you can create a different emotion around it, which will produce a different experience of it. So here's how it all works. The moment your mind encounters anything in your exterior world, using the sensation instrument that is your body, your mind will collect the data it is receiving and search its memory for any correlating data. It will there compare what is happening now with what its memory holds about any similar prior event, and use this combined data to form your present truth about the event now occurring in your exterior world. A soul knowing all emotions are chosen, they are an act of will. Your truth about it will be drawn mostly from your past, and least of all from what is actually happening right now. This is because what is happening now is but one byte of data compared to the megabytes of data your mind holds about similar prior events. Now is simply overwhelmed by then. Today becomes deeply mired in yesterday. The truth that your mind forms in this way creates your thought about what is happening, what is now occurring. This can be either an imagined truth, the apparent truth, or the actual truth, depending on the quality of the data the mind has accessed. Your thought will generate an emotion, and that emotion will very rapidly produce your experience. All of this, in fact, happens in 1/1,000,000th of a second. You will then call the experience you arrived at in this way reality. It is by this process that you create your own reality. Now, just think, if you were to change the data of your mind ahead of time about all of your past, using the law of retraction, You could rise to a new level of preparedness to experience mastery in this moment. Because whether your mind is caught up in memories of the past, or you are deeply engaged in a challenging present moment and wish to change your mind this instant about using the same tool, you will in each case encounter gratitude. And that is transformative. What has been labeled New Thought Movement has been saying for years, you create your own reality. But sadly, it has not explained very clearly how you're doing it. Reality creation goes far beyond simple positive thinking or making affirmations, approaches that have been touted as the secret to producing what one desires. That's child's play. It is the sandbox of metaphysics. And so, of course, in movies and books about life's big secret, these simplistic approaches are shown manifesting simple toys. If you really want to know how to create your highest experience of yourself, and not just put a new car in the driveway, if you really want to create a better world, and not just a necklace for your bodice, you will benefit enormously from an understanding of the mechanics of the mind, as outlined in short form above. As rich, wonderfully clear, and far more detailed explanation of this can be found in the book When Everything Changes, Change Everything from Hay House, 2010. That's also by Neale. As fast as the mind works, it still works only on the data it is working with. Computer programmers are very familiar with this concept. GIGO, garbage in, garbage out. So if you have put garbage into your mind about life, about God, about any particular experience that you had stored in your virtually endless memory, garbage is what is going to come out of your mind about anything in the present moment that even looks like a previous experience. And all of them do in one way or another. Yet if you have put your gratitude in, then gratitude is what is going to come out. It's still GIGO. What we are saying here is that if you live in gratitude for all events, then gratitude for every one of your present moments will arise, regardless of the event itself. The employing of gratitude as a tool is what separates the master, who always does so, from the serious student, who occasionally does so, and the serious student from the initiate, who has not even yet heard of it in this concept, or who has heard of it, who uses it very rarely, if at all. The mind understands that every event in life is part of a contextual field, as explained here in chapter 14, creating a space within which to express the next grandest version of the greatest vision that the master ever held about who the master is and chooses to be. The master, therefore, says yes and only yes to every experience. And the master says it joyfully, gratefully, for the master knows that a glorious moment has arrived that is perfect for the glorious expression and the experience of glory itself, called divinity. How can the master be anything but grateful for this? And when the master knows that everything occurring has been co-created by many souls working in collaboration and agreement with the master's own soul to produce their circumstance or condition currently presenting itself, how can the master complain? Or would the master disapprove? Or of what would the master disapprove? End of chapter.
Well,
I had a friend who, whenever anyone said well like that, would say deep and wet.
um, does anybody want to start?
Yes is a world, and in this world of yes, live. I mean, I've said that here before, that poem I read somewhere in my 20s and understood that that was a key, right? Took me longer to understand it more completely. And obviously, you know, this is a lovely iteration of why. Why we need to say yes to every moment and joyfully. That's the part I'm still working on. But I'm much better than I used to be.
That's all you can ask for. I kept thinking about here I am, 65 years old. And I still have issues with the loss of my father when I was 8. And it's not all the time. But if I see a movie or a show where a parent dies, then the floodgates will open. So I try not to watch those. And somebody a few years ago said, "Oh, you've got to watch this movie." What was it called? Julia Roberts was in it. And she's going to be the adoptive mom of the kids because the mother is dying. And anyway, this sister-in-law of mine got a hold of me and said, "You have to watch this." And it caught me on so many different levels because I had married a man whose wife had died, and he had 2 children, which I adopted. And I had been a child of someone who lost a parent. And I came undone. I had to lock myself in the bathroom for like 2 hours afterwards. And I was thinking about, while you were reading this woman that I was telling you about yesterday, who had a model of a brain. And it's your left brain has this business, like if this is the brain, it's got a little business right here, and it's where our emotions come from. And I know that I have some control over that emotion now because I can hear somebody tell a story about losing someone and I don't come undone at the seams. And I think the thing that gets me is on those times where it comes out of nowhere, it's like a surprise. Am I selecting that emotion? Or did I have time to do any selecting? Anyway, I'm rambling.
I'm not rambling. That's exactly why it's a very difficult concept for us to grasp. He says it right there in the chapter. It happens lightning fast, you know. I don't know, Nannette. I mean, I think losing a child that early is a very hard thing in that moment. And, you know, you're a little older than me. And I don't know if you encountered any of that sort of judgment of your tears at a certain point. Like at a certain point, you're supposed to be over this already, you know, and you were an 8-year-old little girl, and it takes a while to process that level of loss. And I'm sure you didn't have this tool and the kind of wisdom to say, oh, this experience will be great for me 30 years from now so anyhow, I think Lynda talks about trapped tears. She hasn't talked about them lately, but I would imagine that coming from our society, which wants people to get over grief very quickly, you probably had tears that didn't process at the time. And so they're still left. There's also, you can tell, I mean, I can tell when I'm sort of getting caught up in a story around it. That I think is different. But like, you know, you might have just tears that didn't get a chance to come out. And if you're always trying to avoid it, they still might not be having a chance. That's what came to me while you were talking. Over.
Interesting, because I can guarantee you, and I'll be real quick on this, the morning that my mother told 4 young children, I was the oldest, that our father had died the night before. She told the story to tell us. And I thank her from the bottom of my heart for doing it that way, because what she did was say, do you remember that time that Daddy walked all over the neighborhood looking to borrow a ladder so he could get this robin that was stuck in kite string? And he finally got a ladder, and he finally got up there, got the bird untangled, and he took the bird to the vet, but God decided to take the bird anyway. And then my mom said, so last night, Guy walked around the neighborhood looking for a ladder. And he took your daddy down from his kite strings. And I remember being 8 years old thinking I felt so much older than when I look at an 8-year-old now. I remember looking at my mother and I said, do you mean he died? And she said, yes. And I cried and cried and cried and cried and cried. And then this older woman that I never really cared for was there. And she pulled me into the bathroom and she took a wet washcloth, wiped off my face and said, you need to pull it together for your mother. And I think that's part of what all that's about. And so it would come on at times, like you were saying, like lightning. Lightning seems to be the catchword of the day. Where I don't even have time to think about the fact that I'm about to come undone. And I've gotten much better. So I don't want you guys to sit around thinking that every time I hear somebody died that I go into tears, because I don't. But anyway, who else has something to say?
I can, yeah, you remind me of when my father died when I was 14. And he was the most important person in my life. And as I had no brothers and sisters, I had no one to talk to. My mother was occupied with her own sadness. But I felt so much gratitude that I learned so much that he was such a wonderful person. And he had been sick for 2 years, so I was a little prepared, but not just at that moment. And I mean, the gratitude was stronger than the sorrow. I don't know why, but it was like I came into a meditative state of gratitude of all I've learned from him. And every time I think of him, I feel the same. And the same is with my daughter who died 18 years ago. When I felt I was not really sad. I was so grateful that she shared her moments with me, that she was so close to me and shared the whole process and was with me when she died. And when I think of her, it's the same. I feel so much gratitude and love. I think the love and gratitude is connected very deeply. And I learned, I said this before, but I have learned that we don't need to close our hearts from people who died, because they are, as my daughter said, it's worse for you who will still be here. But my life continues. She was in such a bliss state when she died. And I think that's very much, I mean, how it's our own things, because and that's why love and gratitude for me is connected deeply, and it's a healing process also to see, because this body will die, and my sons and my grandchildren, they will experience that this body goes away. But why don't feel gratitude that they had me when they had me? I hope they can still feel the love when, and I feel the same with my mom. She was very old. She died 7 years ago. And I can't feel that. I just feel gratitude and love that I learned to know, and all the situations in my life. That's my state of being. I don't know why. I'm crazy.
No, you're not crazy.
No, you're not crazy.
Connected.
No, but I think it is because I experienced since a little child this oneness with everything. That's why I am with you here. The oneness with nature, with the oneness. And I walk in the forest still and I feel that oneness. And why, as long as this body is here, this body is a part of cosmos. And yes, this body is as much cosmos as every star out there. So why just feel gratitude that we can reflect in a way that animals are not doing and trees are not doing. We are very special.
We don't know.
No, but we are different. They don't paint or build cars, drive cars, and they don't do all these things. That is different.
I'll let you know if I see that.
Yeah, anyway, so gratitude and love is deeper for me than sadness, and I don't get angry either, so that maybe has healed that. So yeah, thank you. Over.
Thank you.
I have two things. One is when we talked about death and then our society, I think I'm very thankful that throughout my life I get to know places or people or situations where I learned not to sweep away the sorrow and not to sweep away, just to stand in it, not to hold it, but just to proceed it. And I think every time I could do it, I just feel released. But I also have some issues from very, very to childhood where I couldn't do it like this. And they are just sometimes popping up when similar situations are coming and I have to go through. And I think since I started not to make the world around them, through them, it becomes better. It's not good, but still better, and I can deal with it. That's one thing what came into my mind. And the other thing was the feeling of the gratitude was shared before. It's just having the experience that someone I really loved died, and I still feel her presence very strong. It just gives me a lot of hope, not only hope, it's just to be trustful or to trust in life. That, and I think that's very important. Beside and even thinking of it's not about the other people. It's always about us. it's not because they have been suffering also, but I think we are the ones who suffer because we imagine in our head also, what will we do when we reach this state? And I think when we reach this state, I like the idea to have a party, and I also like the idea that people choose when they want to go out of their life and have a big party, and to say, okay, after I have danced a lot, and so I think I have to relax a little bit and then to just go other two and just to sleep into the other side. I don't like the idea of making with death something very bad or something very whatever. It's just like going to bed in the evening, but and going to the other side, and the next morning I will arrive on in another state, or in another state. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I totally
thank you.
agree. I totally agree about not making death. We act like death is some horrible thing when it's the natural ending to everybody's life. I mean, sometimes it's feels less natural, and I think that's, harder to comprehend.
I also agree completely to that.
Yeah.
Why shouldn't we do that? As a Himalaya caveman was sitting inside and just decided to leave. And that's my postulate inside, that I want to go into meditation and be in that state, even if it's when I'm sleeping, and just live. That's beautiful. Why? I
And
don't need
I like the idea of throwing a big party too. Invite everybody I love for a bash. And then that happened on Grace and Frankie with a character. The other thing I wanted to say is I'm really glad that when my dad died when I was 18, so we keep getting older, nobody told me to stop crying. Nobody made me feel like it wasn't okay to cry as if the world as I knew it had just ended, because it had. My dad was the most important person to me too. And, nothing was ever going to be the same here on this physical plane, because that person who was my rock had moved into a different state. And in those days, I didn't understand it as clearly as I do now from this conversation, because that's not how I grew up. We didn't talk about death as just, you're just moving into a different. And I didn't know intuitively, like Bima knew everything from when she was born. You never forgot. Most of us forget or are programmed out of it. Anyhow, I just wanted to say that I'm happy that nobody ever told me stop that crying ever in any way, no matter how rude or kind, over my dad. And there were a lot of tears throughout the years at various times when things got triggered. Like the first time I went to Italy and I ate lasagna and it tasted like my dad's lasagna. And I went back to my room and cried. Anyhow.
So I think this is a really critical conversation, because it's the piece that most people don't understand, right? Most people think that they're their bodies, and they're going through life basically ruled by their bodies, because they don't realize that it's just the housing that we're inhabiting. And the other thing that most people don't realize is that the influence from previous or future lives is so those lives are concurrent. There's no such thing as time. We've created time in this three-dimensional world in order to experience sequential events. But in the real sense of what's happening here, those things that we think of as past lives are congruent. They're happening at the same time, parallel to these. And our bodies, as these vessels that we inhabit, are connected linearly to all of those other lifetimes, and they bleed through. So that's why you'll hear me and other teachers say, if you can heal it in this lifetime, you heal it across all lifetimes.
Mhm.
And so quite often, these emotions that we feel, like Nannette, who couldn't stop crying, that's being influenced by other experiences in other lifetimes at the same time.
Yes.
And so if you have unprocessed grief in any of those lifetimes, you're going to have unprocessed grief in this lifetime. And so I think, you know, for the most part, we're pretty much, most people on this planet are the tail being wagged by the dog, and they don't know that. So bringing consciousness to the idea that you have control over your emotions is really, it's like, it's a real secret. Yeah, it's a missing piece. It's a secret. I have a personal process that I do every morning. And one of those things is to write out this, it's what I developed. I call it an evolution archetype, but it's a whole series of I am statements. And number 2 is I'm in control of my reactions. Number 3 is I'm in control of my feelings. So, I mean, this is true. We have the ability to choose how we want to feel. It may not be our initial response, but that's what being in the now is all about. In the moment that you feel yourself tripping off into some other place, you make that conscious choice to come back into yourself. And using gratitude as that tool is powerful, really powerful. Over.
And the other thing I want to add, Lynda, that came to me during this chapter, but I had forgotten, is that it is like programming yourself. And I know that, you know, I spent years doing my gratitude journal every night, writing down at least 5 things I was grateful for. And sometimes it was more like, you know, 25 or 55. But it's like it programmed it into my consciousness so that when things arise, it's easier to look for the gift. And that's one of my gifts now, is to look for the gift, you know, and kind of sometimes gently, if someone seems open to it, help them to look for the gift in something that happens. You have to be very gentle with that, because people are entitled to not want to find the gift in horrible things, you know, right away. But it is, you know, what I was feeling while reading it is, it's like you can definitely program yourself. And it's, you know, for me, it was not like an instantaneous, now I'm much more conscious all the time of my reactions. It was like a process of becoming more aware, and then, you know, being able to increase the space between the reaction is what I'm working on more now. But even that, it's like improving, because like something happened on the bus. I don't remember what trolley happened on the trolley. And I was able to just go, okay, whatever. Now I'm just going to sit here and beam light at everybody in this car with me, you know, and just like being able to be conscious and have choice. Yeah. It's like you can program yourself for that to be easier, was my point.
I agree with that.
Me too. Mhm.
And I do that a lot, actually. Where I just start shooting out love. You know, it's like, love, 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 love. And I didn't really love what just happened, but I'm going to love, love, love. You know?
Yeah.
And good conversation.
You know how some trees, when they lose their petals, it's like, we used to have one where I lived where it looked like it was snowing because it was all these tiny little apple blossoms, I think, but the petals fell apart. That's how I shoot love. Like little petals raining down.
Well, that's a good vision.
I like it. That's why I shared it.
That's good.
Very
I'm
good
not-
conversation.
Well, we have 10 minutes left. Do we want to try to read or do we want to just?
I don't think, well, I think we're going to want to talk about the next chapter, so I'm not sure we want to read and then just end.
Okay, let's not do that then. Has anybody here ever heard of Jude Caravan?
Not that I know of.
I heard about it, but I didn't go deep into it.
She kind of reminds me of a toned down Barbara Marx Hubbard. And
What's her name?
Jude Caravan, Currivan. She's very much into cosmology. And
Yeah.
she just wrote a book that I just put on my Kindle like last week. And I've only had about 20 minutes worth of time, but it made me very curious to understand what quantum physics are. And I found myself, because I've always thought of myself as I did my master's of education in the English department. I did my undergraduate in the English department. I loved English in high school. My mother was an English teacher. My grandmother was an English teacher. I tried teaching it, didn't like it, and said, that's not happening for me. But I think that I forgot what I was going to say. I can't stand it when that happens.
Something about quantum physics.
Oh, thank you. I found
And
myself.
I think the way she explained it also, yeah.
The way she explains it is really very good. But I found myself watching all these short videos that are done by the public television, PBS, public broadcasting company here in the United States, about scientific things that I've always wondered about that were really very, very good and very easily understood. So that this thing called physics was not like this like stop sign for me. It's like, no, I can't know about that. It's too much for my brain. And I got this physical high from being interested in the physics and how there are a lot of physicists, so they say, whoever they are, they're the first scientists coming together with the idea of oneness, because they can't, for a lot of them, like Bruce Lipton and Greg Braden and others, they can't separate the two. It's like some of the astronauts that have, orbited the Earth, who went up there thinking they didn't believe in anything, who came back and couldn't believe that they didn't believe in anything. Because when you look at the Earth from a spaceship or rocket capsule, whatever it is that they're at. This guy named Edgars, I can't think of his first name, but he was one of, I read a thing about him that, and this was a few years ago, how he didn't believe in much of anything except for his work. But when he got back from this trip orbiting the Earth, he had an epiphany that this can't, it's just can't be all there is. You know, this life, this one life, you're dead, you're gone. And it changed everything about him. But I just think it's interesting with this Jude Currivan, who talks about cosmology in such a way, and quantum, it's, I think she calls it quantum cosmology. It's very understandable and not one of those things where you think, oh my God, I need an education in physics to understand this. But anyway, I don't know why I was bringing that up, because we had some dead time.
You know, here's the thing. This is the one piece that pretty much all science is missing. Everything is consciousness.
Oh.
And until they get that, like they're really close. They're really, really close. Some of them are very close. But until they get that everything is consciousness, they're still missing that one piece, and they won't figure it out either. You know, a really good book to start with is by, it goes all the way back to 1979, Gary Zukav.
Yep.
Who wrote The Seat of the Soul.
Yep.
That's another incredible book. But he tackled this quantum physics business back in 79 with the Dancing Wu Li Masters. Great book, great book. And then Seat of the Soul is a great book. And, you know, Gary Zukav, he's just waiting. He's like me. We're just waiting for the scientists to figure it out, because we've got it figured out, right? That's what it is. It's consciousness. Everything is consciousness, and that's the clue and the key. Everything's just dancing around it.
I think that's one of the reasons I'm so pulled in by our belief system, and I'm including you in our, because we have a different way of seeing things, and we may not have it mastered, but you don't have to mess with me for a minute and I'll tell you we're all connected. And I have this thing in my head about back when all the continents were one continent called Pangea. And was part of the breakdown with humanity,
Interesting.
the breakdown of those continents.
Hmm.
And
Interesting.
thank you. I think I'll write a paper.
Write paper, I'll read it.
But I actually wrote, and I don't have it handy, and we could do this some other time, but I did write a meditation about it,
Oh.
about how all the continents were coming back together.
Why don't you share it with us when you send out your letter?
I will share it with you.
Oh, that's great. Thanks.
And it basically is that people can start to see the gap of the oceans become so narrow that people can see each other. And they realize that they're all part of this one thing. And they all put their hands up like this and reach across this narrow bit of ocean and touch palm to palm. And it's just a thought I got in my head one day and I couldn't get rid of it. So I wrote about it. And who knows? I mean, it could happen.
Beautiful thought.
Well, I write about the fact that I think if you look at the maps, I don't think that they split apart the way that we're told they split apart. Because if you push them together, the way we were told they came apart, and you look at the color of the people, it doesn't work. Like Africa and South America right next to each other, you'd have Black people and brown people, and it doesn't make any sense. But if they split apart the other way, it's cohesive, right? The colors all make sense. The people to the north have the lighter skin, the people to the dark have the darker skin, and it all makes sense just looking at the color of the people. So, all of this stuff, again, it goes back to the winners of the wars are the ones that write the history. And so what we're told is what people have wanted us to be told. We aren't necessarily told the truth. Like, all of our history is not necessarily truthful. It's the imaginings of the people who won and how they want to present it. And there's a lot of things about history that are not explained. And if you go into the basements of museums around the planet, you will find things that no one will talk about or let you see. And it's like, none of this is really what we think it is.
I totally agree with that. Given that it's a minute after, and I know, Lynda, you have to probably skate, but thank you for reading. And Mary, would you like to talk us out of this one?
Sure. Here we are, our 4 expressions of the all in all. Lynda left, but she was here too. There were 5 of us today, each being our own individual expression of the thing that exists, the one thing that exists. I call it the all in all. So I've seen it described as like an energy field, and everything is like a little dot of energy. So we are the dots that came together here in this field of infinity, and everything else is also its own little energetic expression. And as Lynda's saying, with its own consciousness. Trees' consciousness is different than human consciousness, is different than, cat consciousness or crystal consciousness. And we all have our own expression of the consciousness of the divinity of the thing that unites us all is that we are all these expressions in the physical of that same thing, the non-physical. And as we here in this space remember that and share that in life, as we go about our lives and we are expressing that, the knowledge of the oneness as we, bounce around as our own little human, that affects everything that we come into contact with. And that all ripples out. And, I really do believe that that can change everything. And as Lynda said, that can heal other lifetimes on other timelines. And all of that can express into what everyone is experiencing, to lift that into a higher realm of consciousness and awareness and more love, right? It's really all about more love. And on that note, thank you all for being here and listening to my little ramble at the end of our beautiful, beautiful conversation. I love you all so much.
Thank you. I love you guys very much too. you gals.
Girls, okay. Girls, okay. Dancing around, bouncing around.
That's
Okay.
right.
Wishing you girls a very beautiful week as you might dance around the trees or whatever. And yeah, enjoy the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's good to see you coming
Until
back,
next,
Dima.
until next time.
Yeah,
Nice time.
I just want to mention that Gary Zukav came to Sweden with to Ambres, where he got this from a higher level. He has written that in a book. I remember that.
Who is that?
Ambres was a Swedish medium who channeled Ambres.
Oh, yes,
that-
yes.
Gary
yes.
Zukav went there, and there I think his journey inside in that way started very much. I heard about that. Yes, remind you, I have met this Sture who guide these Ambres. I have met him personally.
Wow.
So yeah. Anyway, so that's
All right. Love you
Hola.
all.
Bye bye.
Bye-bye.
love you all.
Talk to you later.
Yeah.